All right. So, patch notes, guys. So you guys, if you watch my stream, or if you watch my YouTube, or if you read my Twitter, or honestly these days, even if you look at the Underlords subreddit, if you play the game, if you've ever queued into the same lobby as me, if you've seen me emoting in our game when you've queued into the same lobby as me, you probably know how I feel about the current meta. All right. Let's start with a tiny update. I'm gonna preface this by saying, I don't think this patch is perfect. I do think it actually fixes a couple things though. All right, a tiny update. So yesterday, as of today, yesterday was Thursday. Today's Friday. In the evening, they released their Thursday update. It was very small. They changed very little, and a lot of people, myself included, got outraged. I wouldn't say outraged personally for myself, but a lot of people on Reddit were complaining. I was kind of definitely like face palming a little bit. Is that something people still do? Face palm? I think that hasn't been a thing for nobody said that for like 10 years. Let's talk about what this is at first, because there was the second update later. Okay, so as you probably noticed, today's update is pretty small. Let's chat about why this is and what's coming. We talked about our plans. We detailed the features we were working on in the next big update. Internally, we are calling that update the Big Update, and it's one of the last milestones on our road to Season 1. This update will include 2 playable Underlords, the Duos team mode, 6 new heroes, 3 new alliances, and an updated user interface. So, ooh, big, a lot of things. But it doesn't mean that Duos isn't coming out until later, which is a bit of a delay because they've made references to Duos coming out like last week or this week or next week. Okay, we're currently shooting to release this update in the first half of October. It's the first half of October. When people say that, they basically mean the 3rd week of October. Honestly, in dev talk, this is pretty much an average thing to expect. I know that might seem weird, but usually, sometimes it's the 2nd week of October, but usually it will actually be the 3rd week and it'll be like a little bit delayed. Either way, you should just expect it around the Ides of October. Okay. The final stop will come not long after with the official launch of the complete game in 1.0. This will come with 2 more Underlords, the Battle Pass City Crawl, and will be the official beginning of Underlords Season 1. To give you an idea how far apart the internal and external builds are, here's our current dashboard. Yeah. So here's Anna 6. So this is a demon lady. She actually looks quite a bit different than on the main menu, right? She looks really different. This is a 3D rendered model. Wait a second. Because on the main menu, she looks like this. Her skin color is completely different. She's like drawn. Wait. That's so weird. I kind of like the old version better. Am I weird? I just like something about this just speaks to me a little more. Like, when I see this, I see tingles. I'm just like, but this is like, So something about this. I'm not sure what it is. These differences extend to other areas as well and are fully intertwined, making it difficult to ship them separately. This is why we've decided to spend all our efforts on finishing and shipping everything together. You can expect any updates from the few weeks to be more like bugs and balance categories where you prepare for the release of the big update. I cannot wait to talk more about Season 1 with you, so expect to hear about it soon. So, I do personally think, first of all, it's a bit disappointing that Duos, at least, isn't going to be out for a while. They're just doing everything all at once, which, I was kind of expecting, like, this week we'd have something cool, next week we'd have something cool. Because they kind of hinted, like, when we were looking through it the other day, they were talking about where a long time ago, this would have been 3 weeks ago. We went through this yesterday, and, like, there's just, like, kind of the wording and the way they delivered this. It heavily implied that they were releasing these as, like, different things, like Duos in the next week or two, then Underlords in a few weeks, and then lastly, Heroes and Alliances, right? Like, that's the kind of thing that I was expecting, and I think that would have been better for me personally, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys agree. I know a lot of my friends, like a lot of people in like the Lords Discord, are saying basically, see you guys next month kind of thing. Like, a lot of people are, kind of they're gonna put the game into like a kind of hibernation mode, and they're just gonna be like, well, yeah, I mean, I still like the game, but I'm not going to be playing it a lot or even maybe at all in the next month because the meta is a little stale and because, you know, these new content things are not going to be happening for a while. Like the next month is just going to be bugs and balance, right? So that was the first update. And like I said, a lot of people were a little outraged at that. There were a couple posts on the Underlords subreddit, as expected. A lot of it was talking about, you know, disappointment that this is going to be delayed. Honestly, though, I don't even really hate that. Like, one side of me is a little annoyed that this is delayed, and I kind of wish that it was sooner. But, I mean, delays happen, and that's a development process. Like, that's something that, I mean, you shouldn't feel entitled as a player. These things happen. They have their reasons. We don't know their reasons. And it probably makes a lot of sense internally, right? The one problem for me, the one really, really big problem for me is the current meta, right? That being said, I mean, this last thing where it says you can expect any updates the next few weeks to be more in bugs and balance category as we prepare for the release of the big update. I mean, honestly, I don't think I would hate it if they just kind of like nailed balance of the game. If they made it feel like a balanced meta. So right now, for those of you guys who don't know, we have been for the past 3 weeks in probably the longest and most people would say worst, kind of unhealthiest meta that the game has been in for a while. A lot of people are trying to like stay positive because a lot of people still like the game, but the meta just, you know, incentivizes some really kind of unfun, you play the same thing every game sort of gameplay. Which isn't really great. And it just has been like this tier 0 good stuff builds that everyone has been forcing. So if they actually like address this properly and make the balance good for the next, like, I guess, I mean, it is a full month. We probably shouldn't be expecting this in the first week of October. When they say first half of October, I really think like the average release date of first half of October is probably going to be, yeah, like the third week. I mean, if they're releasing on Thursdays here, let me look at my calendar real quick. So if they're releasing on Thursdays, October 2019, Thursday means October 17th. I would personally be shocked if this update was before October 17th, because like 17 is on a Thursday. They're gonna be like, well, we aimed for the first half. It's the week of the first half. The 14th falls in the same week. So, you know, I mean, they'll get away with that, and that's fine. That's probably what they have in mind. But that is legitimately 5 weeks from now, right? That's even more than a month. So, I don't think I would hate it if the game was more balanced. But I guess we'll move up to the second patch they had later on in the evening, a couple of hours later, where they kind of saw the sort of outbursts that were happening on Reddit. A couple people were like tweeting stuff, and let's go ahead and see what's actually going on balance-wise with the game right now, which I'm sure everyone's waiting to see. Okay, so we have updated our servers with the following changes. All right, so the following changes in this case. Give me 1 second. Oops. Following changes means reduce the chance of finding tier 4 units by 5% from level 6 to level 8. So this is a huge deal for good stuff. This is probably the single biggest change that has happened. And this was what spawned good stuff 3 weeks ago. Good stuff has been becoming more and more popular. Like, I've been playing it more. You know, other people, Bebe has been, I think, touting it for the past like 3 or 4 days or so. I don't think he was a believer at first, but I mean, at least for the past few days, he's been like recommending people to spam it. I mean, even I was like, I wasn't super early on the train. Like, I've been playing good stuff for like 2 weeks now, but some people have been playing it for like 3.5 weeks, right? Like, some people have been playing it since like before it was cool. And I mean, this was all caused by basically 3 weeks ago, where they bumped tier 4 odds up by a lot and increased the tier 4 population to 20, right? And that's a really, really big deal. So now they're kind of stepping that backwards. They're kind of reducing this. And Yusu in chat is saying, can't you just level to 9 quickly? And that's actually exactly true. That's the first thing I thought of when I saw this. Let me step back a little bit first, though, and actually talk about what the exact odds are, because this doesn't actually say, and that's a little annoying actually. So I can go ahead and pull this up here. These are going to be the odds. This is from something like Grey Mao sent in the Discord, and this is basically just like the new odds. So this is level like 6 through 8 or 6 through 10 rather, and as we can see, these are like the new teardrop probabilities on the upper columns. So if we look at this, we see that on level 6, you have a 5% odd at the tier 4 drops instead of the 10% it was before, and that's just like coming out from tier 1s. At level 7, it's 10 coming out from the tier 1s again. And at level 8, it's 15. And then at 9, it spikes to 25. Whereas before, it was 10, 15, 20, 25. It was just a gradual increase. And already, even with that gradual increase, people were already spiking to 9. The most popular strategy for good stuff was to go to level 9 on anywhere between 22 and 25. You would do it on 21 if you had like the super nuttiest game ever, but you would go to 9 between 22 and 25, and then you go to 10 on 31 almost always, but 33 sometimes. That was the level timing of good stuff, right? People will already go to 9 super early. So what this change does is it's kind of interesting. It does address it in certain ways, which is that specifically, you know, when you're playing good stuff, it's hard to get the stuff online earlier. Because good stuff, when good stuff can get like a level 2 Doom, or a level 2 Arc Warden, when it can nail that on like round 21 or round 22 without rolling, because you're not rolling at this point in the game, but you know, maybe you pick up one Arc Warden randomly on like round 11, you pick up another on 16, and you complete it on 19, you know, that's like, wow, I can greed to 9 now, I have a nutty thing. That doesn't really happen anymore with these new odds, not to the same degree. It's definitely going to hurt their ability to complete these early free units. But at the same time, it's important to understand that this does literally increase the incentive to level to 9, right? Like leveling to 9, if you want to play good stuff early, is kind of more important than ever. So they're not deleting good stuff as a build. It's just you have to level to 9 early, which was the way to play it anyway, right? It's going to be a little bit harder to kind of like freely carry yourself until then. You'll probably have to make a little bit more like early game upgrade plays. Like for example, there's a lot of situations where if you watch my videos, you'll see me not upgrade like a Treant Protector, you know, because I'll be like on round 18, I'll be like, why upgrade this now? It's already too late. I'm going to be replacing my board with Warlock soon. Maybe this change, because things are like lagging behind, will incentivize me to do like temporary upgrades like that, because my board is going to fall behind a little bit. Okay, so that's one big change. One thing I will say about this that's really important is this is not just a change to good stuff, okay? And let's talk about why that is. Let's talk a little bit about why good stuff has been so good in the past few weeks, because a lot of people don't understand exactly why it has been, and a lot of people are actually skeptical and think that it actually hasn't been that good, which is honestly kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so tier 4 odds. When you look at tier 4s, about half of these are actually part of good stuff. A pretty shocking amount. That's Alchemist, Arc Warden, Doom, sometimes Kunkka, Necrophos, and Tidehunter. That's like, it's basically like half of an entire category is part of a build. When that happens, it's very dangerous, right? Because like when you look at, for example, let's look at like Scrappies who have a couple tier 3 options. It's like you're in Clockwork and you're in Tinker. And then if you're in Assassins, you're in Slark and you're in Phantom Assassin. That's like it for your tier 3 Scrappies. But we have a build where good stuff was representing basically half of an entire tier, which is a problem. Part of the reason that's a problem is because when the odds go up, when the odds of tier 4s go up, that means you're finding all these tier 4s. If you're in a build that's not good stuff and you're finding all these good stuff units, it feels really bad. So another way to look at this change is it's not just a nerf to good stuff, this is actually a bit of a buff to other things as well. More on that later, but specifically the fact that let's say you're in Knights, or let's say you're in Scrappies, okay? You're not going to be finding these tier 4 units. In Scrappies, you know, you might want to pair Warlocks, so that might hurt that one Warlock you're looking for. But because you're going to have less odds of finding these tier 4 units, that's good for your build. You want the other things. You want the 2 costs and the 3 costs to 3-star your CK or your Abaddon or whatever, right? So like this actually does change probably more than it looks. I need to actually test this out to be 100% certain. I think this does nerf good stuff and it does buff everything else. I don't think good stuff is bad. I will say I think good stuff is tier 1. Before, I think good stuff for the past 3 weeks has been tier 0, and it's taken people a while to realize that. Like, it's been tier 0 for 3 weeks. It took me a little bit to realize that. It took like a lot of other streamers a while to realize that. But I mean, it has been tier 0 for 3 weeks. Tier 0 is something I don't know if it's been formally defined. When I see like a game or a strategy game, I see tier 0 as when it's basically the sole member of tier 1, and then we just call that tier 0. It's like just this is just better than the other strategies, and then like the other few strategies that are below it become the new tier 1. So I would say this is probably no longer the only thing in tier 1, which means it's not tier 0 anymore. I do think that it's probably a tier 1 strategy. I think that this is still good. If you want to keep playing the game like this, you can. I suspect that it's not like the only way to play the game anymore, right? But some skeptics are saying, well, this totally is still going to be the only way to play the game anymore, and they might be right. I'm personally very concerned if they're right, but we'll have to test this out. It's going to take a couple days and a lot of games. I think the most important part is the 35% odds on tier 3s. Yes, the 35% odds on tier 3s are actually a very, very big deal as well in the change. Now, when we look, and I'll pull this up again just to talk about this. This is the one last thing I was going to mention. So we have tier 3s being at 35% on 7 and 8. And these are the rounds where you're rolling, basically, in a normal build. Staying at 8 is just kind of like, you know, the new thing. Well, I shouldn't say the new thing. Staying at 8 isn't like the new thing for normal builds. But, there's 2 different strategies in this game. There always has been and there always will be. There's always going to be one strategy where you go to 8 at 21 and you roll for 3 stars. And there's always going to be another strategy where you go to 9 early and you just try to 2-star stuff. That's always been the pattern. It's like a 3-star meta where you go to 8 and you roll. Or, you know, like a legendary or good stuff meta where you go to 9 and you roll and you're not 3-starring, but you're getting 2 stars of more expensive units, right? You can even roll at 7 for 2s and 3s. Yes, exactly. So one thing to note is that, and you know, this is something I pointed out, you will see tier 3s are at 35% now, right? That's what we're talking about. I'll show it like one more time. So at 7 and 8, tier 3s are at 35%, okay? Tier 3s have never, ever been at 35%. Like, check this out. Like, in the past, tier 3s were at 30% at every level. They've always peaked at 30%. They've always peaked at 30%. Their tier 3s being 35% is completely new. This is a pretty big deal, and I do like that they're doing this. This is the last like little thing that I think makes good stuff a bit worse, because tier 3s now suddenly this will really, really help 3-stars. A lot of tier 3s are kind of the strongest units you want to tier star. You've got your Knights, Abaddon, and Omni. 3-starring these Knights is really good. Quite underrated. I think a lot of people will like look at 3-star CK and be like, they'll start aggressively salivating. Abaddon and Omni are both probably better to 3-star than CK, right? We got like Phantom Assassin and Slark. You know, even with the current bugs that are on the passives, which didn't actually get fixed or whatever, but you know, we'll talk about that later. PA and Slark are good units to 3-star. Terrorblade back in action. Like 3-star Terrorblade is very spooky. 3-star Scrappies, Clockwork, and Tinker. I haven't been the hugest believer in Scrappies lately, but these new 3-cost odds with the Ace has kind of been the Scrappy Ace. A lot of people have liked it, but honestly, it's been a little oppressed by good stuff recently. Scrappy Mages with this Ace or something could actually really get there with these new like 3-cost odds. And the most important thing The most important thing too is that these kick in early, right? When we're looking at these odds, these are not just the odds for the like late game 3-star. This happens as soon as level 7, right? Level 7 and level 8. So when we're talking about like if I'm in Scrappies or Knights, completing Omni, Abaddon, the 2 stars will happen a bit earlier, right? For like Tinker or Clockwork, not as early as you'd like still, but you might find them like around round 20 naturally, where, you know, if you're having a bad game, sometimes you still have a couple 1-stars of units that you don't want to have 1-stars on through like the 21 through 23 rounds. And that 5% makes a difference for sure. So anything that's kind of supported by these 3 costs feels a bit better. And we'll talk a little bit about the assassin thing as well. So this one line does a lot to the game. It does a lot. Do I think it does enough? The short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. I do actually think this does enough. Good stuff isn't deleted. It's nerfed. Everything else is kind of relatively a bit better, and good stuff is relatively a bit worse. I do think, like I said, it's still tier 1. But yeah, I'm pretty optimistic for build diversity right now. Hero changes. Arc Warden lost 100 HP, so this is kind of laughable. I don't think it changes much. At this point, it's like a meme. It's like Arc Warden got like, so before it's like the last week he got a 3-second cooldown. I laughed hard at that. That's a really funny joke. That's actually like the funniest thing I've seen in a long while. Now it's like 700. Honestly, I chuckled. It's not as funny as the first one. This is a really hard act to follow, by the way. Like, last week, I'm scrolling through these changes. You know, I'm like, ooh, gameplay, skip, oh, Arc Warden nerf. Oh, look, there's now 3 seconds. Sorry, it gets me every time. It really does. And this is not as funny. It's not as funny. But honestly, it still is pretty funny. But the real nerf to good stuff is above. So, like, don't get me wrong. Good stuff, Arc Warden is getting indirectly nerfed. Let's talk about the other Arc Warden nerf, which was Enigma Ace effect. Now prevents getting mana from attacks while hexed, silenced, or stunned instead of draining it. So now, this is kind of funny. You can't gain mana from attacks you take instead of draining it, right? This is a big nerf to Enigma, for sure. I would say, you know, to be completely honest, I'm not even sure if this is bad now, because you can still run this in good stuff. It's not like as oppressive as it was, but if you have like Tidehunter, Witch Doctor, Troll Warlord, and Arc Warden level 2, this is still a solid ace effect, which is kind of funny. This speaks to how OP it was before. It really does. I think this is okay. I don't know if it's like the optimal thing to run anymore. It depends whether you're like in Doom 2 or if you found the Troll Warlord, you know. It got really nerfed, but it's still something you can consider. Enigma Ace doesn't work for spells, so it doesn't actually do anything. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is pretty funny. The fact that it doesn't work for spells when you are stunned is a big deal. It means your Tidehunter Ravage is no longer gonna drain mana. So yeah, maybe it's probably on the weaker side. Like, you can still use it. It's still not useless, but Enigma as a unit kind of sucks unless you 2-star him. He was kind of being carried by his ace effect for the last 2 weeks, and then before that, he was kind of getting carried by different ace effects, like the KFC meme. Both ace effects have been inherently really OP. Honestly, this second version, the mana drain, has been basically the same amount as OP as the chickens, which I think a lot of people didn't realize. A lot of people at first were like, well, Enigma's now dead. But yeah, I mean, he's been super, super oppressive, and they nerfed him. This is a hit to good stuff. Enigma was basically how good... It definitely did help good stuff, for sure. It was part of the reason good stuff was able to beat Complex 6 mages, which might be able to overtake it now. We'll see. And it was like the kind of like the final capstone. It was like why they kind of always won first place at the end. So good stuff is, after Enigma got nerfed, a lot more likely to be getting like seconds and third places, right? Because Enigma was kind of like the win condition. So this all kind of contributes to the Arc Warden nerf, right? It's like Arc Warden himself isn't getting directly nerfed, but if this nerf matters a tiny bit, Let's Here for Odds hurt him. And the Enigma not being necessary means like his alliance tag isn't actually something that is super necessary. So Arc Warden's still a good unit. In fact, it's still a quite good unit, but it's not something that I would say is super necessary. The fact that it's a lot harder to 2-star it matters a lot, because you can't really 2-star it unless you're going to 9 early. You shouldn't really expect to be able to 2-star this. And what that means is if you're not going to 9 early, suddenly, I mean, you're not in good stuff, right? So you can't just like splash this in other builds. But you can still go to 9 early, and you can still force basically the same build, swapping out Enigma for something else. You can just run it as like a 9-unit comp and just not go to 10 sometimes. So let's go a little bit down. Disruptor, Ace Effect. That reads the effective Warlock Alliance is now applied to 1 target per alliance level. So this is pretty interesting. Basically, what this means is when you have a Warlock pair, it lifelinks to 1. So it's the same. It doesn't do anything if you have a Warlock pair. It's just a 1 lifelink. If you have 4 Warlocks, it does what Disruptor has been doing for 3 weeks, which is the lifelink to 2. And if you have 6 Warlocks, it lifelinks to 3. Yeah, that's right, 3. It's an interesting effect. I think it's sort of an elegant change, I guess I could say. Bit of a problem with it is Disruptor is a really strong unit, and all this does is it doesn't really nerf Warlocks. I want to be clear with this. It specifically nerfs 2 Warlocks. It's kind of harder to run 2 Warlocks now, right? If anything, it probably buffs 4 Warlocks, because 4 Warlocks is more necessary. 6, there's some people that are thinking about the idea of going to 6 Warlocks. I think to go to 6, you're probably going to want either a Summoning Stone for your Venomancer or a big time contract for your Mr. Warlock. If I have a contract, I could try 6 Warlocks with Disruptor. I could see that. I think at that point, though, healing is kind of not what you want. Usually you want to combine Warlock effects with other things to make it valuable, right? It's like, that's what good stuff does. It combines a good amount of Warlocks, 4 Warlocks. Don't get me wrong, Warlock is like the strongest thing in good stuff, I guess, if you have to pick a single thing. Just from the Alliance tags. Obviously, like, Arc Warden as a unit, and some of the Aces are really strong, but just from the Alliance tags, Warlock is like the strongest Alliance. Okay. And if you had to basically, if you wanted to try to go to 6 Warlocks and take out something, like, what would you take out? First thing is probably Scaled, but when you think about it, like, the Scaled is kind of helping the Warlocks more than the Warlocks, right? Like, if you have 6 Warlocks, your units will heal a lot, but they can actually still get blown up, whereas, like, you know, you want to do, like, 4 Warlock plus 2 Scaled or something, or 4 Warlock plus 3 Warrior. You don't really want 6 Warlock. Like, that's kind of too much healing at that point. You're still going to be losing to certain things. I don't know. 6 Warlock, I'm a little skeptical of, but honestly, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, having a lifelink of 3 is actually insane. Disruptor is still insane. Maybe this is just the future of good stuff. You level to 9 early, and you just go 6 Warlock instead of the Shamans. You just don't go Enigma. Maybe you don't go Arc Warden, depending on if you find enough Arc Wardens, and you just go 6 Warlock good stuff. You just level super aggressively to 9. 6 Warlock good stuff. Maybe that's the new build. That could even be the strongest build in the game. Who knows? Anyway, Warlock Alliance. To compensate for the Disruptor change, Warlock Alliance is 70% lifelink at level 2, which is 4 Warlocks, and 100% at level 3. So obviously it goes down 10% at 2, which is just a straight up nerf. It does reduce the amount of healing you have at 4 Warlocks. And at 3, it's a lot harsher. It's a 30% nerf, but that's because of Disruptor's now new effect, right? So the last change, Assassin Alliance, this was actually bugged for a little bit, but it's fixed now. On a critical strike, Assassins wound the target, reducing healing done by 50 or 100%. So 50 is at 3 Assassins, and 100% is at 6 Assassins, which actually does give you a bit more of a reason to go 6 Assassins, I suppose. I was saying earlier that there's never been a worse meta for 6 Assassins. 6 Assassins is the worst it's ever been right now. And I think it's really, really important to understand that, okay? I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, and I'm going to talk about why that is, because I think it's really, really counterintuitive, and I want to talk about how it affects Warlocks as well. So let's go to the Assassin changes 2 weeks ago, okay? So Assassin level 1 at 3 heroes goes from 300% crit damage chance to 15% up from 10. So what this means is it went from a 20% DPS increase to a 30% DPS increase. So it's up 50%, 20 to 30%, 50% of 20% is 10%, right? Assassin level 2, 6 assassins, goes up from 25% up from 20%. So now it is doing a total of 75 DPS increase instead of 60, right? Which is, of course, a 25 DPS increase. So 3 assassins gets a 50% DPS increase, and 6 assassins gets a 25 DPS increase. So this is actually what I would consider, and this comes down to how you define things. I would call this, when this happened 2 weeks ago, I would call this a 6 assassin nerf. That's going to be very counterintuitive to you guys. Let me explain that. So the reason that is because 6 assassins and 3 assassins are builds that are in direct competition with one another, right? You're going to go one or the other. When you have, like, let's say a situation where you want to go assassins, you're finding Slarks or PAs early or something like that, you can choose to go 3 assassins or you can go 6 assassins. Even though 6 assassins gets a bit better, 3 assassins gets relatively even more better. 3 assassins has been better than 6 assassins for basically this entire game's history. A lot of players, myself included, liked 6 assassins when the game first came out, but it's kind of always been like a kind of weaker build. Pocket Sand did some things for it for a while when Pocket Sand existed, but 3 assassins has kind of been better already, because most of the reason you're playing assassins is to just basically abuse Slark 3, PA 3, and Mask of Madness, and you can do that with 3 assassins just as well. And like I said, if 3 assassins gets relatively more better, and it's in direct competition with 6 assassins, then there's even less reason to run 6 assassins than before, even though it has a percentage increase on its value. All right? It's really important to understand and evaluate patches like this. So let's talk about 2 things about how that influences things right now. Suddenly, there might be, I guess, a bit more of a reason to run 6 assassins, I guess. I still am not a believer in this. I don't think you need to reduce healing by 100%, but I guess it's possible 6 assassins. I really think 3 assassins is just the way to play it. This is enough of a buff to 3 assassins that you still don't need to be thinking about 6. But let's take that same logic and look at the Warlock Alliance, right? There's going to be some builds. For example, let's say you're in Scrappy, right? You're in Scrappy, you're running 4 Scrappy, right? Okay, because 6 Scrappy is kind of bad. Maybe it's better these days because of the Techie's Ace. But let's say you're in 4 Scrappy, so it's like Alchemist and the 3 Inventors plus like a 4th Inventor, right? Or like 5 Scrappies. So it's like Alchemist, Tinker, Clockwork, Timbersaw, and the Techies for the 5th Scrappy. 6 Scrappies is often not worth it, but you can do it if you're in like 3 assassins sometimes later. I would say it's generally not worth it. But let's say you're in Scrappies. You've got Alchemist, right? You've got Alchemist for a Warlock, and because you're in Scrappies, you're now deciding, okay, I've got a Warlock. I want a second Warlock. Warlock is still a good alliance. I'm always going to have a second Warlock in Scrappies. So that could be like Necrophos, could be Shadow Fiend, could be Witch Doctor, whatever my second Warlock is, right? But I have a decision in front of me. I can go 2 Warlocks or I can go 4. So maybe it's like Scrappy 2 Warlock 3 Assassin, Scrappy 2 Warlock 3 Mage, you know, and Mage can work with like Shadow Fiend, because that's a lot of magic damage. Or Scrappy 4 Warlock, which is like 4 or 5 Scrappies and 4 Warlock. Suddenly, again, the same logic applies. You're thinking to yourself, okay, well, Disruptor is now... So 4 Warlock has gotten worse. Look at it this way. Like 4 Warlock, Disruptor is the same, and the Warlock Alliance is 10% worse, right? But in the same way that 6 Assassins getting a little bit better doesn't matter if the 3 gets relatively even more better, 4 Warlocks getting a bit worse doesn't matter if 2 gets relatively even more worse. You can't abuse Disruptor with 2 Warlocks anymore, right? So like in the same way that 6 Assassins got worse when it looked like it was getting better, 4 Warlocks is kind of getting better even though it looks like it's getting worse, right? That's kind of what I'm saying. Because even though 4 Warlocks is 10% less, going 2 Warlocks isn't as much of an option anymore. So builds like Knights that are thinking about 6 Knights, 2 Warlocks, or 4 Knights, 4 Warlocks, suddenly they're like, well, 4 Warlocks is a bit worse, but 2 Warlocks kind of sucks now. Disruptor is still really abusable. Maybe I have to go 4 Knights, 4 Warlocks, right? Same with Scrappy. They're deciding whether they want to go 2 Warlocks or 4. They're like, well, I mean, 4 is a bit worse, but 2 is a lot worse. Maybe I have to go 4, right? And a lot of it depends on if you find a reasonably early disruptor. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you can't go 2 warlocks, but the point is that it's not as simple as to look at this and say, oh, it's 10% less. It's a nerf, right? Like 4 warlocks is still very good. Disruptor is still very good. 2 warlocks is quite playable. I mean, you can run like 6 knights, 2 warlocks in the right game, but I don't think that's, you should be looking at this as like, you know, you have to go like 2 warlocks or anything like that. And the same is true for like the Assassin Alliance, which I was talking about. Like staying at 3 assassins is going to be in every way preferable to 6 assassins. Well, isn't 6 knights not even going for Disruptor? Right, but that's the problem, because Disruptor is still so good that you want it. I mean, I can tell you right now, 6 knights is worse than 4 knights, 4 warlocks, right? Now, what I mean by worse means in an average case situation, in a majority of situations, you're better off going 4 knights, 4 warlocks than 6 knights. I can tell you that right now. That being said, I mean, maybe that's only like a 55 or 60% of situations, right? Like, 6 knights is still good for sure, but I don't think a lot of night players feel like they have to go 6 knights, and you really don't. Like 4 knights is quite good, but there's just different ways to play it, and some situations are going to incline you one way, and some are going to incline you another. To go 6 knights, you really need to be finding a ton of Lunas and a ton of CKs, otherwise it's just not worth it. Anyway, that's the patch in a nutshell. So I think that's like my total, like my patch note evaluation. It's how I think of the meta. I think there's a lot of playable stuff now. I do think good stuff has been bumped down. I mean, before it was just like unequivocally, like there was basically no arguments. Like nobody like below a certain Lord ranking was making an argument that good stuff wasn't like the just end all be all best way to play the game. I saw like there's always going to be like some random comments. I saw like a Reddit post that said specifically like, good, you know, meta, there's always counterable stuff. Instead of crying about good stuff, just find a way to counter it. And that's honestly, that's a really funny comment. Like that kind of made me laugh too. Good stuff was just the best thing in the game. I wish it wasn't, don't get me wrong. And I appreciate people wanting that to not be the case, because that's what I wanted it. But good stuff was the way to play the game for the past 3 weeks if you cared about your rating and if you wanted to climb. Now, I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's still a very good way to play, but it isn't the way to play. And that's all I really needed out of this patch. There's a couple of things that I probably wanted, which is, you know, a fix to the passive bug. Right now, every level 2 passive is, as far as I know, I don't think this has been fixed. I don't know if anyone has tested it since after. I assume Yusu has, because Yusu always tests this stuff. But as far as I know, every level 2 passive is still giving level 3 stats, which is part of what carries 6 mages. And, you know, that bug can be fixed, and as well, like, they, I guess, could smoothen out, like, a couple other things. There's still some slightly strong concepts, like Big Time Contract is still, I wouldn't say too strong, but it still feels very powerful. Summoning Stone still definitely helps you carry good stuff. There's a lot of stuff that could have been smoothened out, but I think the only change this game truly needed was this change right here. And I like that they took this percentage chance and put it into 3 cost odds. I think that's actually the best thing they could have done. Not in terms of, like, after reading this one line and being a little hesitant, then realizing they put them into 3 cost odds was the best change that could have happened. So we could be back into more of a 3-star meta. You have the option for good stuff, more flexible. So, yeah, overall, it's the one thing that needed to change, and I think they changed it. So that's honestly going to be, hopefully, a pretty solid meta that we're going to be sitting on for 5 weeks until this big patch. Okay.